Welcome back to the Profitable Python. I'm your host, Ben McNeil, and on this episode, you will meet Felix Zumstein. Felix is the mastermind behind xltrail, a version control system for Excel workbooks, similar to how GitHub works for standard text files. He is also the creator of xlwings, which is the most popular open source library to program Excel with Python on both Linux and Mac. It's Mac and Windows, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Felix, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Hi.
Yeah, this is a really exciting interview. I use Excel a lot at my job, and I think xlwings plays a great role in helping us. My question to you is, you have a famous white paper called Make Excel Audit Proof. Why is this topic more relevant than ever?
I guess because Excel is just not going to go away like many of the people or managers would like it to be. And so you just have to look for alternatives, right? You have to look for the option of keeping Excel around and have your users use Excel, but then at the same time kind of try to, well, get rid of some of the quirks that Excel has, or like maybe it's better to say like the way that people deal with Excel leads to these quirks, and it's not maybe Excel as such. And that's why I guess it's it's time to look into this from a different angle. So from my experience in talking to a lot of clients, many of them, they try to, it's either Excel or it's not Excel. And then, they invest a lot of money into migrating away from Excel and getting a production system out of the ground. And then once they have the production system, sometimes reality just moves so fast that the production system can't keep up with reality. And then people start to create Excel tools again on the side, and they just download some data or copy paste some data from the productive system, and then kind of it all starts over again. That's a bit why we're trying to kind of look at the issue in a different way and say, okay, I mean, Excel in a way is just a programming language, right? It's a bit of a funny one. It's a bit of a funky one. A guy at Microsoft actually, he described it as being like a programming language which is in constant debug mode, right? Because instead of like the formulas, you usually always see the value, which you don't see in like a more traditional programming language, where you see like the formulas and the code, but you don't see like the value, except if you like step through with a debugger. Mm-hmm. And so that's a bit that's a bit what's happening with Excel. And so we kind of try to just look at Excel as yet another programming language and try to build tools that bring developers like best practices and developers tool into the world of Excel, where maybe most of the people, they don't have like a formal computer science background. We try to make these tools accessible to the standard Excel user. That's pretty much the way we look at things.
Yeah, the one thing that really caught my attention in that white paper was how basically how heavily Excel is relied upon in some of these massive organizations. And then when mistakes occur, I mean, like legislation gets passed on how to manage your data better, because like shareholders lose value. And it's crazy how important it is, and maybe even overlooked on like how we're managing our Excel workbook. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's what really caught my attention.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I guess Excel is used across the board, across all industry, across all teams, but it's probably still most famously used in finance as an industry, but also, let's say, in an accounting department in any company. And so uh, it is actually a bit surprising that such sensitive processes are still heavily relying on Excel and Excel only. So, I mean, in the white paper, I write about, I believe, the Marks and Spencer case. So a couple of years ago, they published wrong sales figures because of a double counting issue in Excel. And I mean, it's a big company, I guess, and they have money to tackle the important processes in a bit more reliable way, I guess. But then, nevertheless, at the end of the quarter, probably there is some stress in getting the numbers out, and so in the end, Excel is still the thing that these people know and are most flexible with. And so that's probably how these things happen. But as I said, I mean, it's about it's not having the standard processes in place that, well, developers have kind of agreed upon over the couple of last decades that makes it so hard. I was also like surprised. For example, I saw a tweet most recently, and the tweet was saying that Apple was actually using, well, spreadsheets. I'm not sure if in that case it was Excel or maybe it was Apple's numbers, but that doesn't make a difference. So they were actually using a spreadsheet to do some one of the latest iPhone product. What was it again? Something involving the latest iPhones. I believe it was a like an ordering process to get some of the parts or some distribution. I forget the details now, but it's also because they're I think they had an IBM production system, like tens of dollars per year system, and it just couldn't cater for the flexibility that they needed in that moment, and so they just had to go back to spreadsheets, and that's a bit what I see happening in the industry. But I believe I forgot your initial question. I kind of drifted away.
Well, mainly just like why are these things more relevant than ever, and then just kind of like any remarks on the case studies in your white paper. But I think we've pretty much covered it. It's like
okay,
it's just crazy how prolifically these things are used, but we don't put the planning into how we use them like we would some sort of a fancy software system that we would either create or implement. Like we don't do unit testing typically. I mean, at least in my world, I work in oil and gas using a lot of Excel spreadsheets. It's just an Excel spreadsheet driven world. And there's a huge emphasis on doing things, making things, and not a very huge emphasis on like unit testing and audit, audit proofing things for, anyway, it's I'm happy you're making these tools. So we'll just carry on here.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, I mean, unit testing is a topic which even amongst seasoned developers is sometimes not a very popular thing to do. So trying to explain the concepts to people who deal usually with PowerPoint and Excel is yet an even more difficult mission, I guess, to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, the first, I guess you could argue like maybe just even giving them these tools in their tool belt is considered progress. Those weren't really. I think there's a project called Rubber Duck that's an Excel add-in, but even that wasn't very intuitive. Like I think the whole PyTest or the unit test setup that you have where it can just call in and it's all native Python stuff. That's what I'm all about there. But
yeah, I guess so. I mean, there's talking about unit tests. There's a couple of frameworks that have emerged in Excel. So there is one or two, just add-ins you can download and use, and they try to make things work. but it's just a lot of work for those developers to bring everything into, you know, a unit testing framework, and then also make this kind of it integrated with Excel, with your Excel file, or maybe you have a couple of Excel files, right? So that already makes it so horrific. Like, how do you call one function from a different workbook from the other function where you have to unit test? It's just, I mean, that's like a really complete afterthought. So that's something that's really not, well, it's hard to do with Excel alone.
Mm-hmm.
And so for specifically this functionality, that was actually probably wouldn't have occurred to me, but I was actually contacted by somebody in the industry who was telling me, hey, I'm using xlwings for unit testing spreadsheets. I can't be the only one, right? And so that's kind of how I learned about it, and I looked into it. And I have to say that, yeah, I mean, as you say, you can just use Python with the built-in unit testing framework, or you can use PyTest, I guess the most popular third-party testing framework in Python. And it's just, everything is there. I mean, you don't have to jump through hoops to achieve anything, like, you know, set up and tear down methods on all different levels, from individual functions to classes or to whole modules. You have things like, you know, that take care of the floating point inaccuracies, so you don't have to invent an own method, which basically makes an almost equal comparison. And, well, I mean, with the xlwings functionality, which is kind of, you know, makes it easy to access into the cells and get maybe a whole dynamic table out, no matter how large it is. It's kind of really, really simple to, well, change a few inputs in your spreadsheet and then check if the output is what it is supposed to be. And then, I mean, that's one way you can use the testing framework on Excel cells, but then you can also equally easily use it on you know, where you would expect unit tests, like more traditionally, which is on the VBA part.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, you could think like VBA is dead, right? So Microsoft hasn't invested a single bit in the VBA editor over the last probably 20 years, and the language hasn't evolved at all. But I mean, even though I guess a lot of people are starting to dabble around with something like xlwings, it's still very, very popular, right?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, there's a lot of legacy around, and so for that, it's actually really good. I mean, you just put your unit tests in place, and you can easily test your VBA code. And I think, I mean, from what I hear, people are, I mean, I heard it from more than just that one initial xlwings user, that people are actually doing it and finding it a good addition into, like, you know, that whole spreadsheet governance kind of framework that emerges more and more, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just starting to dabble with that in my current processes, but I couldn't be more excited. Especially the other thing I wanted to dig into was your Git, basically the Excel trail. I think there's a lot we could, just our company could benefit a lot from integrating that into the mix. But I'll have to report back to you how that goes. But I'm sure it'll just be. VBA does some things really nicely, but like you said, it was an afterthought, and you know, for the unit testing thing. So, anywho, um, so before starting Excel Wings, you worked in banking, and I was curious, how did that experience lead you to discover Python?
So yeah, that's right. So after university, I headed straight into banking, which is pretty much the easiest choice you have here in Zurich, in Switzerland. And I was then kind of dragged into these more technical teams. So at times I was the only non-PhD or non-math physicist uh, guy in the team. And so the teams I was working with were highly quantitative, and they were building software like risk systems to analyze, stock risks. Um, and so we always had the need for internal tools. And I mean, the teams have been around and the tools have been around for also a long time. So the natural choice back then was for any non-native computer scientist was to go with MATLAB. And I guess back then there wasn't much of a better choice to achieve, the mathematical calculations that people in banking and risk teams have to do. And it's an ideal language for people, as I said, who don't have a mathematical, a computer science background. So people who don't feel comfortable doing some C++, I guess, or anything back then. But they just wanted to get the job done, and Excel at some point, wasn't good enough. So that was a very good choice some 20 years ago. But then, well, I guess software development evolved, and the web technology emerged. And so you know how it is, right? You have a large legacy code base in MATLAB, and then you just look for building around some nice web UI around it. And so you stick with it, and you just kind of try to marry it with whatever technology you use on the front end side. So in our case, in banking, that was basically .NET world, and they were building ASP.NET front ends, based on the Microsoft web technology. And so they, MathWorks, the company behind MATLAB, they also caught up and gave you some compilers so that you can basically make a black box code out of your MATLAB engine, and then kind of stick it into a .NET front-end solution. But the issue, and that's exactly what they did in banking. So the issue with that is that you have this classic barrier between the programmers who were doing the web front end, and then the mathematicians and the physicists and the engineers who were doing the MATLAB risk calculations. And it was just basically to the front end developers, the MATLAB engine was just a black box that was accepting some inputs and was spitting out some outputs. And usually that was like, okay, the outputs was big arrays. It wasn't efficient. There wasn't an architect an architect who was actually taking care, or who understood the whole solution from top to bottom, right? There was always this split in between. And so MATLAB, again, the roots are basically, it's a very old software, and the roots are in single desktop installation environments. So for that, it actually works well. But for getting it into a productive system on the web, there's so much hassle to go through. First of all, there are the costs. It costs a lot as a desktop license already. But then if you want to compile it so you can stick it into a web front end, like deploy it, right? That costs another insane amount. And so, it can only run on one developer's computer, and then that developer is on vacation and you can't deploy the code, things like that. So I just started to wonder, like, if that is really the best way of doing things. And that's kind of when I, for the first time, actually came across Python, because people on the web were suggesting that instead of MATLAB, you could actually switch to Python and the NumPy, SciPy ecosystem. And so I played around with it, and I thought that it's incredibly nice. It's open source, so like the whole hassle with getting your MATLAB installation, verified and getting a license key on top. I mean, they made it really hard to do that. That just falls away, and then Python is very strong on web development, right? So I mean, Python. I guess, I mean, nowadays it's you're in a much different position, like, to judge on what, like, what the strengths are, or what the industries are where Python is mostly used. When I started to look into that, maybe in 20, probably in 20 something like 2012, so some 8-9 years ago. That wasn't, I mean, it wasn't so strong yet. So, like, for example, pandas has just kind of come out of nothing. And people were starting to look at it, but by the time I left banking, Python was very much still like, well, whoa, open source, no, like, it's not approved, stay away from it. And so, I mean, that changed very much. And I mean, nowadays we can say, I mean, Python is extremely strong in everything about data science, machine learning, just about, well, anything in pandas, competing with R in that area. And obviously, it's also very strong in the web technology. And back then, I guess that wasn't so clear as, I mean, as it is today. But still, you could tell that there were already great web frameworks back then, 10 years ago. So you could actually see that you build your scientific engine with with NumPy and SciPy. And as I said, Pandas was just emerging then. And you can, without any additional effort, you can just put it on a web server and have people use it. And that to me was so convincing that I knew I wanted to go down that route and not stick with MATLAB plus .NET. And that's when I decided to hand in my resignation, pretty much, because I saw that there was no way anytime soon for the banking industry to catch up with Python. I was a bit wrong with that, I guess, because a few years later, things changed very, very quickly, but still, I couldn't wait all these years. So it was definitely the right choice to make.
Yeah, that was actually part of my next question was, what was the decision process like for you to break away from banking? But it sounds like your awareness with the technology, and it was just kind of like something you saw, like greener pastures over here, and so you just had to leave, is kind of what it sounds
pretty
like.
much so. I mean, the reason, I guess, is also because, or I don't have like a formal computer science education at all. I have like a master in economics, business administration, and I basically got into, well, software development, maybe more from like or definitely more from a product management perspective during my years in banking. And then just started to love making technology, or dealing with technology, more than basically also dealing with the raw risk figures or portfolio like construction, things like, things you traditionally do in a banking job. And so I just also well, as I said, I mean, I wanted to break away from kind of legacy technology, even though I guess Excel could probably be classified as a legacy technology too. So I only partly succeeded in that. But I wanted to, break away from MATLAB and .NET. I wanted to do Python. I wanted to do more technology, less finance. And that was basically the reasons why I quit that job and tried to start something based on technology.
Yeah, that's awesome. With that plunge that you made, kind of going from finance to technology or banking to technology, what would you say your first success was after you made that plunge? So first,
So
yeah, go ahead. Mhm.
yeah, first success, I guess. First success was that I had a very small consulting gig pretty much right away after I left banking. And at first I was kind of hesitant to accept it because I wanted to have a break and, well, just kind of do nothing for anybody but just for myself, like
Yeah,
learn Python, get into it. But then I thought, okay, well, maybe it isn't such a bad idea to actually get a little bit of money and a little bit of real world exposure to start this adventure off. And so I then, after sleeping on it for 2 or 3 days, I gladly accepted that job. And it was a basic financial portfolio optimization, and that was, fortunately enough, I mean, that's why I kind of got into that into play there, was requested in Python, right? So basically the team who wanted that, they were traditionally also hooked on MATLAB, but then things got more involved with getting accesses to paid licenses.
yeah.
So that was actually that was a good thing. So I was building that in Python, and then basically the client, she asked me if she could access this portfolio optimization functionality from Excel. And so yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I guess the first success was basically that I was able to acquire a small consulting job, and then kind of based on that first consulting job, my second success, which probably I would rate even higher, is that I came up with that framework xlwings, which allows you to interact easily from Python to Excel and vice versa.
Hmm.
So it's two separate small events that together are probably the biggest success I had at the very beginning there.
Yeah, I think what's so beautiful about that entire situation you just described is, this awesomeness that Excel Wings brings to the table would have never been born if you weren't kind of willing to, sever the whole banking thing and then be willing to put yourself out there and go get these clients. And then it's almost like you couldn't have dreamed this up. Like it had, these things kind of had to happen in order for it to even to become a thing. And so for other people out there that are like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to, make money with my ideas, like sometimes you can't really start out with that intention. You just have to be willing to solve people's problems. And that's kind of what I got out of your story. That's so awesome, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was definitely, I was in a position I was looking for a change. I had the luxury to be able to live off my savings for more than just a month or two.
Hmm.
So I didn't have the immediate pressure to get back into the industry. And yeah, I definitely wanted to learn something in that time. And I mean, xlwings, was my first, my first program in Python. So it was mostly a learning process back then.
Yeah.
Um, and and yeah, I guess, I mean, I'm pretty sure that the thing about banking is that I'm pretty sure there's many teams everywhere in finance. They probably come up with similar solutions like xlwings. They come up with similar solutions like pandas, but the issue is nobody ever sees those solutions, right? Because
Yeah.
they just stay in the company, they are used internally, and
Hmm.
that's where it ends. And so It may be changing a bit, but I think overall that will take a lot more time for people in banking to contribute to open source, let's say. So that's definitely one big plus, that I could just do whatever I wanted. And I still today, I mean, I still sometimes have smaller consulting jobs in finance, and they are always happy if we can build something as an open source framework and maybe push it out, because if they do it internally, there's no way to get it out of that door. So there's definitely that. So unfortunately for most companies in finance, it's still extremely difficult well, nowadays I guess it's easy to use the open source stuff, but it's still extremely difficult to push back to open source projects.
Yeah, I guess they covet that intellectual property more
Yeah,
than helping the world stop reinventing the wheel, but to
yeah,
each their own, I guess.
yeah. I think there might be exceptions to that rule. I don't remember now, but I thought I read about some frameworks in finance that is going to be basically done on open source. But
Okay.
yeah, I think mostly that's not the case. I would even assume it's not even just a finance issue. I guess it's just like a big corporation issue where it's still pretty difficult to contribute back um, to open source in
Hmm.
an official manner.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I have a question for you here. So xlwings can directly run SQL queries on ranges. It opens up the doors for automated testing with VBA we had discussed earlier. It can serve your workbooks as REST endpoints, amongst other features. What is your favorite feature?
My favorite feature of xlwings, um, probably my favorite feature in that sense is that it's cross-platform, so that you
Mm,
can use it on Mac and on Windows, because traditionally all these interactive tools, they always almost just work on Windows. And so, I mean, first of all, I guess for people who are listening and are not that familiar with the Excel Python world, I mean, first of all, you have to also understand that there's two different kind of Excel Python packages. So there are like the Excel reader and writer libraries, and they work everywhere. They even work on Linux, and they work without an installation of Excel, right? They just read the file format directly. They write the files directly on disk. And so they run everywhere where Python runs. And that makes them like a brilliant choice to use when you are bound to a Linux server, which usually happens when you deal with web technology. So they do a very, very good job there. Or if you just, use Python to read in some data from a spreadsheet. But then, then there is basically what we do with xlwings is different in the way that it's a replacement for VBA. It's an interactive use of Excel, so you have to have an Excel installation. And as I said, usually these tools they only work on Windows, and people only ever care about Windows. And so when I started this back in 2014, it has been very quiet about Excel on Mac for a long time. So there was a Mac Excel version 2011. And that version it kind of was usable. It supported VBA. It looked a bit weird, and yeah, it was just kind of it wasn't very much compatible with the latest Excel version on Windows. So they had done like a lot of iterations of Excel on Windows, um, and they were just leaving Excel on Mac untouched. And then so a lot of the rumors on the internet were suggesting that Microsoft had actually dumped Excel on Mac. And unfortunately, in 2015, I guess, we were all proven wrong, because they released Excel 2016, Office 365 for Excel on Mac. And I believe, from what I read, it's like in the first time in whatever 20 years that they managed to use the same code base for Excel on Mac and also for Excel on Windows. And so basically, I mean, first of all, it looks nice. It actually looks like Excel, not like Excel 2011. It has pretty much all the same shortcuts and all the same functionality. And they continue to evolve it. So yeah, I was very happy to get a proper Excel version. I mean, it's still, there's still one or two things that you would wish it would do better, but I mean, for most of the things, it's really a really good offering. And so yeah, I mean, obviously that did break xlwings, and I had to invest a few more weeks to get it back working. But finally, it worked again. And so that's definitely one of the things I love most, because, well, my main machine, I mean, first of all, my main machine is a Mac, so I can just, for most of the things that are not Windows specific, I can just use my Mac and program on xlwings. And the other reason is that it's an underdog Excel on Mac, but it's probably larger. The share of people who use xlwings on Mac is probably larger than you would probably imagine. So we made a survey a year ago, and I believe we had at least about 15% of the people who are using it on Mac or on both environments, so Mac and Windows. And I guess some of the fancy hedge funds and these kind of companies, they do actually use Macs. So me personally, yeah, I'm really happy that I invested the time to do it. There's just one functionality we don't support on Mac, which is the user-defined functions. But who knows? Maybe in the future, in the distant future, that will change.
Yeah, there's so many features. I would just recommend that folks go check this stuff out. I mean, there's like asynchronous processing, to name one of them. I also liked how easy it was to yank data through, like, basically talking to any web service that you could, talk to with Python. You can yank that data into a sheet and just hit your Control Shift Alt F9 or Shift whatever those commands are to just refresh, and Shazam, you've got fresh data in there. Anyway, there's probably not enough time on this show to go into all of that, but man, there's a ton of features on there that are just pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, people use it for all kinds of different things. So one of the functionality, funny enough, that has emerged as one of the most popular functionality is to use it as a reporting engine. And that's, like, kind of surprisingly, that's extremely, like, at the other end of why I was building xlwings.
Mm-hmm.
So I was building xlwings for interactive tools, like using Excel as a front end, being able to click a button, have Python do the dirty work in the background, and spit the data back. But I was always, under the impression that reporting was exclusively a thing for those writer libraries that we just touched upon before. Things like packages like OpenPyXL or XLSX Writer or XLWT. Depending on which Excel format you want, you have to use a different package. So that was, in my eyes, these were always the go-to solution for reporting. But it turns out, I mean, they have in certain circumstances certain limitations, like if, for example, none of these writer libraries support the XLSB format. And you could argue that XLSB, well, is a bit of a weird choice if you just use Excel to dump some numbers and format stuff. But then again, I kind of have stopped, like, asking why people do certain things with Excel a long time ago. So, just take it as a fact that there may be some XLSB file where also some reporting happens. And so that's where you're kind of left off with something like xlwings to take that, cover that functionality. Or the other issue is if you really have a template in Excel that you just want to fill in the missing data, then what happens is there's actually only OpenPyXL able to edit a file. And from what I understand it, what it has to do is basically it just reads in all the characteristics of that file, and then produces, again, using the same characteristics with the edits you made, to produce a new file from scratch. So it actually has to produce always a new file from scratch. And so that's kind of also the fundamental difference between these tools and xlwings. xlwings literally opens the file in Excel. It just remote controls it. It doesn't do any other funky thing to it. And then so that it's really, I mean, you can control your Excel workbook exactly the way you want it to be. Whereas with the writer tools, sometimes the formatting is can be a bit off. So for instance, like if you have a specially formatted chart, which, well, happens to be kind of important in reports, I believe they don't cover everything. So sometimes when you edit it with OpenPyXL, you may lose, let's say, like a data grid you have below a chart, or a chart title. They've improved though, so I'm really impressed, because last time I looked at it was a couple of years back, and back then they would just lose, I believe, all the charts or all the pictures you had in the Excel file. And nowadays they actually keep a very good version of that. So I will definitely recommend to try something out like OpenPyXL also, and only like when you hit some issues with that, do it with xlwings, because if you use it for reporting, then you're always bound to an actual installation of Excel. And that just sometimes is an issue if it has to be scalable, if it has to be like wrapped into a web server. So for that kind of use case, OpenPyXL or the likes are always kind of preferable. But yeah, if you hit one of these issues I mentioned, then xlwings is a nice alternative to just work on the original Excel file.
Yeah, it sounds like if I had to describe what is the biggest pain points that your software solves, it's almost like if you need like an interactive experience, but you need that Python to be able to do some heavy lifting, kind of push the limits a little more in your workbooks, or dealing with like these fancy formats in reporting. Like, is it safe to say that's kind of the main pain points that you solve? Or
yeah, definitely. I mean, it's automating stuff, and it's writing user-defined functions in Python instead of VBA. And I mean, everybody who has used VBA, I guess, knows that it's just a big pain. I don't know, are you writing VBA at all?
I cut my teeth on VBA. I still write VBA every day because I'm working in Access, and I do a lot of integrations between, because like we need a lot of offline functionality for certain reasons. And so really Access, Excel, PowerPoint, like basically we've got people in the company that need to be able to generate reports on an airplane and they need the beautiful looking like Excel chart formats in a PowerPoint, presentation basically.
Yeah.
So it's almost like before your software came along, I felt like I was doomed to VBA, and the world is just passing me by with all this fancy technology, and I'm stuck using, VBA. But I can't bash VBA. I think it does some certain things very well, but with the marriage of what Python and VBA, like I feel like my life has no limits now, and so I'm
Yeah.
forever grateful. But
I mean, it's just so much easier, right?
yeah,
Because I mean, I started to code naturally in VBA as a first language too. But I mean, it's like you have to basically Google every other thing you try to do, and
yeah,
you end up just going onto some forum and copy pasting like a page full of code to do a simple thing. I mean, just like, let's say you want to read a file in Excel
right,
with VBA. I mean, in Python, you just do, with open file and then you dot read, and that's about it. So you have 2 lines of code. And in Excel, you have, I mean, then it depends if you want to have it compatible with Mac or just Windows, which is a bit, which is also, as I said, I mean, there are people using it on Mac. So yeah, you just have to copy paste every time you start a new project. You either copy paste from your old project or you copy paste from the internet. And yeah, sometimes it works, but sometimes there,
yeah,
sometimes there's auditability issues also with that, I guess.
hmm yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's I don't know. It's if you are a VBA person or you have to interact with VBA, just I guess take my word for it. If you don't want to take the founder's word for it on the xlwings and some of these other libraries can really just improve your quality of life. I don't know how else to describe it. If you have to work with that stuff.
I
Um,
agree.
uh, what is your biggest takeaway from your entrepreneurial experience so far?
The biggest takeaway, you have to make money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, you have to make money. And that's a bit the thing where after a while, like being really in love with the open source world, it kind of, well, you kind of just are confronted with the reality at some point, and you will find out that xlwings is a really great product and a lot of people love it. And you can have maybe a link on the homepage that says, hey, if you need some support or consulting, just give us a shout. But nobody will give you a shout. So that's a bit the issue. And yeah, of course, I mean, you get maybe once or twice a year, you get maybe something out of that, and you get to solve a small consulting gig out of that, but it's not going to keep you going, right?
Hmm.
And so that's a bit the takeaway, in that for me at least, not that I didn't have that really clear at the beginning, but still it's great to put it in front of your eyes, like clearly again. It's like, okay, just writing an open source library, um, well, doesn't come with a business model. And you either have to find a way to make it work as a side project, or you have to find a business model so you can actually put in all the work that it probably deserves. And so it took
Hmm.
us quite a long time. We initially had it as a side project, and we we well, initially, tried to use it as a door opener for our other product that we have, xltrail. You mentioned initially the version control for Excel, but also that wasn't a direct kind of source of income to maintain xlwings. So yeah, for sure you get a few leads from xlwings who are then interested in what else we do, and then maybe one or two they convert into a paying client, but that's not gonna keep you alive, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not on a big enough scale. So basically, we throughout the years we did evaluate a couple of different ways of how to make xlwings profitable, or kind of get money for its maintenance. But the let's say like the no effort stuff didn't work, right? So just putting a priority ticket costs $200, doesn't work. Okay, there is maybe 2 or 3 people in 5 years who have an emergency and are happy to pay you double, just to get it resolved, but that still leaves you with $400 per year, which
Yeah.
doesn't get you very far, right?
Right.
So that didn't work neither. The door opener in that sense wasn't working well enough. The priority tickets weren't working well enough, and so we're basically just now trying something new, and it looks a lot more promising, and that is basically creating and offering a pro version for xlwings with additional functionality. And so the pro version has a price like any other software, and just adds some of the features on top of the current community edition, the way that we now call it, that we hear most often, and that we just, as an open source project, we just can't take the time to work on it to make it happen. And so some of the functionality that will be in that initial release, which is really kind of being finalized basically as we speak for that initial xlwings Pro version, is on the one hand a proper reporting package. So it's one thing that I was, again, I mean, at the first step, I was to begin with, I was surprised that reporting, was a thing with xlwings, as I initially thought that was more of an OpenPyXL kind of thing. And then to be continued in my to be surprised, in the second step, I was also surprised because users were asking us to improve the reporting experience. And so that isn't really what we did. And so the reporting package is going to be part of the xlwings Pro package, of the xlwings Pro offering. And what the xlwings reports functionality is doing is it allows you to really define templates in Excel, very much the same way as you define templates in HTML, let's say in a Django or Flask framework.
Okay.
So you would just compile, you would just use Python to compile all your data. Usually people, just use pandas data frame these days. So they connect to any SQL database, they connect to CSV files, they connect to REST APIs on the internet. They get all the data down, they do the data wrangling in pandas, and then in the end they have like 15 or 20 tables that they just need to arrange on an Excel spreadsheet. And so what we did now is you can put in placeholders in Excel. So you can just say, whatever the name of the table is, you put that into double curly braces, and you put that in Excel at the position you would like the table to appear. And so the idea of the whole thing is that you completely separate concerns. So you have the business user who does not necessarily have to know about Python, who creates the Excel template. And so they will, format the table in the colors, the corporate colors. xlwings reports does also take care of basically dynamic tables. So it dynamically adjusts the height of a table if it has 10 or 15 rows, and applies the formatting accordingly. And I've just recently talked to somebody in the industry, and they're saying, well, they have a team who spend every morning 2 hours on editing the reports, the daily reports, to get the formatting right. So hopefully that product will save them 2 hours every day. And I mean, people are happy to pay for that. And so by adding this functionality on top of xlwings Community Edition, we hope to generate enough money so that we can actually maintain the open source version going forward, but also improve it. So like just by adding the functionality that I was just describing on the templating engine, I was adding about, I don't know, like 10 or 15 new features to the community version, right? Things like insert rows, delete rows that was previously not available. So there's a huge benefit in getting that out, and even for the community version. And the other feature that we're planning for the pro version, in that initial iteration, apart from basic stuff like direct support and continued Python 2.7 support, we are going to also add the ability to store your Python code directly in the workbook. So pretty much the way that you were dealing with in the old days, or for you in the current days with VBA, you can just you will be able to store the Python code in Excel, because that's one of the things that we've heard over and over again. It's like, the deployment is an issue. Deployment is an issue with Python, I guess, in general, if it's not web-based. And if you do xlwings, then you always have to kind of deploy the source code alongside the the Excel workbook, which is a bit of a hassle. So having it all into a self-contained workbook does solve that issue. And so that's why we're investing in that. I was at the beginning of the journey, I mean, it came up like quite early. So let's say in 2014, there was already somebody opening an issue and complaining about not being able to store the code in the workbook. And back then, my answer was also a bit like, it's actually a good thing that you can't store it in the Excel workbook, because that allows you to just write a standard Python file and also properly version control it with Git. And I guess that still is kind of true. But then we started this other product, which is actually the mastermind behind that. To correct your initial presentation, is actually my business partner, Björn.
Okay.
So we started to bring this tool to the market, and nowadays, it's as you said, it's just basically a GitHub system which knows how to deal with Excel files and reads out all the VBA code, reads out all the formulas, and gives you diffs and comparison between different versions. And so our plan actually going forward is to allow you, if you keep track of your Excel workbooks with xltrail, you will be actually able to version control the embedded Python code in xltrail. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. You can keep your code in the workbook, but you still do get proper version control with diffs if you like to, and track things with our other system.
Yeah, that I'll keep an eye out for that. That sounds, I guess the only thing that I wonder is, like, what is the development like? Would you still write the code in an IDE, or would you wouldn't use the VBA IDE, would you?
Oh God, no.
Yeah, I was like, man, that sounds painful.
It
No IntelliSense?
it doesn't even have line numbers, right?
Yeah, there's man, I often wish there was a way that I could write VBA not in the VBA editor, like
Yeah.
have the, anyway, that's like a reoccurring thought that I have.
I mean, to some extent, you can do it. I mean, you have,
Okay.
for example, if you use Visual Studio Code, there is an add-in which gives you VBA syntax highlighting. So it kind of makes it easier to work in that editor. I don't really know because I haven't done like proper VBA work in a long time. I don't know if it's worth like the back and forth copy pasting. So like that's something that probably could be resolved.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I figure you would probably for development you would still leave your Python code in a Python IDE, and then only for deployment you would just copy paste it into a sheet actually that you call my module.py, and
Mm-hmm.
then that xlwings will pick that up automatically as a source file. So yeah, I mean you can edit it in the sheet directly, so probably smaller things you could do there directly, but then I would figure personally that's how I would do it. Yeah, I would probably do it in an IDE
Okay,
for
cool.
development. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Okay, so I had another question for you. Let's see here. So you have an online, or it's like an on-demand video course that accompanies the Excel Wings product. And I was wondering, what major learnings did you have on kind of what it takes to create like a successful video course?
It does take a lot of time to record the session.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just me, or I have to repeat. I misspell myself. How do you say that? I lose it, or I say stupid things, or then something on the screen doesn't work. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to record it. It does take quite a while. So like for I don't know, maybe an hour of video course content, maybe you can easily spend I don't know a day and a half recording,
Hmm.
and that is if you already have the course material prepared. And if you don't have the course material, you can probably spend easily 2 to 3 days for just an hour of video recording. But obviously the beautiful thing about it, it's a one-time pain,
Right.
and then it's more or less done, except of course that things evolve and you have to record new sessions for new functionality, or if things change you have to re-record and put things right. It has been a good experience in the sense that I'm able to sell more courses than I thought initially. But again, it's probably one of the other things that goes into the category that we have tried and that didn't work in terms of it doesn't pay the rent. So it's a nice addition on a monthly basis. It's also obviously not every month the same. But from what I hear, like from people, is that it does actually often solve their initial problems. So for people who have, because I think the situation in xlwings is a bit special because again, you often deal, from what I have the impression, you often deal with people who are not professional coders, right? So it's the people who used to write VBA before. They come mostly from the Excel world, and then they kind of, I don't know, probably get told by somebody that they should look into Python instead of VBA, or they hit they hit the same kind of restrictions in VBA that kind of make you look for a better solution, and they come across xlwings, and then kind of they also come across Python at the same time. And so at the beginning they have really a lot of questions. So sometimes you can tell by questions that come up on Stack Overflow or questions that come up on the GitHub issue tracker that you can't just tell them, well, just fix this and it'll work. It's like, okay, you need to know about how path works on Windows. You need to know about different virtual environments. You need to know about um, making it available from Excel, and it's sometimes there's a lot of ground to be covered if you're really a first like a bloody beginner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe the course actually does that. So it kind of really shows them how to install an Anaconda distribution, how to make sure that the distribution you have just installed will be the distribution that Excel, that you talk to from Excel. And so, yeah, I think that people are, I mean, yeah, it seems to be a thing that people love to learn coding from videos rather than just reading the docs. I mean, the video course as such almost doesn't cover more topics than in the docs. I mean, it has some applications of it that I'm showing, like the unit testing case, or maybe how to move things over from an Excel application to a web application. But other than that, it's really just the docs, but in a much more kind of easy to follow way, like step-by-step guide.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, it seems to work well enough. And video, as I said, seems to be a good format. We also see like there's a lot of interest in our YouTube channel, so people are actually subscribing much more than in any other social platform.
Hmm.
So my goal for this year is actually to produce a lot more like short videos that show some of the capabilities of xlwings.
Yeah, that's really interesting how like the docs are available, but with the video course, like you could, like what, you're only really a couple hours away of going through the docs, and the video just kind of walks you through it. And so from a creator's point of view, I find it kind of interesting, like you don't have to come up with this novel content. Like it might just be kind of like repurposing something in a different form. And anyway, that I appreciate what you shared there. Just as a content creator, like sometimes I feel like I complicate things too much with creating the content, and people they just need a way to kind of maybe wander through the documentation, like that could be pretty solid content. So
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's also for now, as long as we didn't have the pro version, it was also kind of probably the donation button. So on GitHub, I was also putting the link as a donation button because we
Mm-hmm.
don't have donations. We don't, accept donations. But so I also believe some people bought the course to, to basically express their gratitude towards the project, like as a little donation to the
Mm-hmm.
continued maintenance.
Yeah, I made sure to actually go through the entire course before I did the interview with you, and I can tell, like, just with the audience here, like it was definitely a good experience. You get to learn like all the nitty gritty of things that you might kind of like glaze over in the documentation, because it's like, at least with me, I like digesting information through a video, and you kind of do get to see how a programmer operates. Like I liked how you had everything in these Jupyter notebooks that were kind of like the plan was already laid out. You just kind of had to go through the motion there, and then just kind of getting, sometimes it helps to watch somebody else go through the process of like installing the add-in. I mean, you take for granted, like you might, for lack of better words, like you might piss away like a half an hour trying to like figure some of this stuff out. And in the video, I mean, you're squared away in 2 minutes. So, I mean, there's some serious value add with the video course. So I hope people check that out for sure. I found a lot of value in it.
Thank you. I wasn't aware that you were one of the students.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure I went through it before I did this interview, and I have nothing but positive feedback about it. So
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's more didactically structured, right? The thing is, I mean, the docs have grown to, you know, quite some documentation, right? I mean, it's quite some pages, and they would definitely need a restructuring, a redo of the whole documentation. But it takes a lot of time, right? So I mean, documentation takes a lot of time if you want to do it properly. So yeah, hopefully when we get xlwings Pro off the ground, we will have that time to for a complete refactoring of the documentation, and make it easier for people to get started and to follow.
Yeah, that's keep up the good work, charge whatever you need to do, and keep that project alive, because I'm sure it's helping out a lot of people. So I guess we've got maybe 15 minutes or so here. I just wanted to kind of zoom through the last couple of questions here. These are really oriented towards helping the audience kind of grasp their ability, how to monetize their programming skills. And I'd like to kick this off with, when it comes to getting clients, what is your message to someone that is maybe obsessing over their web presence, but is not talking to people in their niche? What is your message to them?
So that's a bit right how I saw it at the beginning. I thought, like, you pull up a web page and then people will come to you and buy from you, and it all works beautifully. And so, I mean, with xlwings, it kind of was that way, except that they didn't have to buy. So they could just download and, you know, they would start using it. And for that reason, probably I thought about that. That's how it works, even if they have to pay. Now, along the way, over the last 2.5 years, that I've been mostly doing, you know, the job of a CEO who has to go out and sell stuff. So I was mostly doing this for xltrail, the version control product. I found out that yeah, you really have to talk to these people, and it's usually also a very rewarding work to do, because these are actually people who, well, you know, they've been in the industry for years. They have been facing the problem you try to solve for years. They can actually give you feedback. They can actually make you focus on what's important, or you can actually find out what's not important or what you misunderstood. And it's usually good, you know, good feedback from them to you, but also you sometimes can help them in a certain way that, you know, is beyond just the product. I mean, you can actually recommend people to store their Excel workbooks in an XLSB format if it's all the time crashing and they're like 60, 70 megabyte big. And you would probably, I mean, I would, you know, usually take that for granted, you know, like people know that stuff, right? But many of them don't. I mean, they just use Excel, and, you know, not everybody's so deep into the matter that they would know all of that stuff. So it's definitely a process of picking up the phone and try to get to talk to your hopefully future clients. And also relatively early on in the process, that's also something I've learned. I've always thought that you need to have like a finished product that, you know, people, they send you a message like they're interested and they want to buy. And I always thought it's an issue if you don't have that product readily available. But that's really not the issue, because of, you know, 50 contacts that you have, eventually there would only be one person who, you know, might in the end be really looking for something you're building, and might want to to buy your product. So that's definitely a learning outcome I made, that sales definitely happens on a person-to-person level, and isn't just an anonymous internet page with a buy me button.
Yeah, with the flashy button to PayPal me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I saw that in the pre-interview, and I was like, man, we gotta get that into the interview somehow. Okay, so you might have already covered a lot of the content in this question, but I was curious, like, what are you, like, 3 tips that you have for people on monetizing their Python programming skills?
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah, as we covered before. So I guess the first and foremost tip here is open source doesn't pay. I personally don't really believe in the donation story. So definitely and certainly there is exceptions to that. But these exceptions are probably, 2 handfuls, maybe a bit more. But it's in very specific settings that the donation button can work. So I know of one specific project where it works. That's Vue.js, the one of the competing frameworks with React and Angular. And that's pretty much the only big project that comes to mind that kind of works on that donation or sponsoring level. I'm sure there are some others, and there are some companies that try to kind of make a business so that you can subscribe to some open source projects, and then that's it. But my take at this is it has to be incredibly big. I mean, first of all, you have to probably start in the web technology, because web technology like JavaScript is just the biggest market ever. And then if you do something, a mainstream framework, then you may have a chance at it. But otherwise, it's going to be very, very, very difficult with the donation thing. Even having a donation button on GitHub, sure. I mean, maybe somebody feels very generous and sends you $5 or sends you $100, but it's not gonna solve the issue if you want to put in the proper amount that you would need to maintain an open source library to maintain that. So for me, the donation button is kind of not an option. And so as a second tip, I would probably just recommend people to think about the potential direct business model alongside the open source project. It may be completely different, because open source is not always open source in the same kind of way. So if you are an open source team within Google and just work on Angular, or within Facebook and you work on React, then that's fine, because your employer has enough money to sponsor that. But if you start out like we did, like I did 5 years ago or 6 years ago, then you just have an open source product. There's no money attached to that. So with hindsight, I would start a pro version, kind of, start your open source project with the pro version alongside. That's probably what I would do differently this time.
Yeah, that's solid. Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing that. And when starting out with Python, what do you recommend that doesn't take much effort but solves like 80% of the challenge on like becoming profitable?
In what way do you mean? Like in terms of a developer's experience, or?
Yeah, I guess we could we could take this a lot of different ways. If your ambition was to create a software product, what is like 80% of the challenge? Like maybe some low hanging fruit to bring that thing to market.
Okay.
Yeah, so something along those lines, I guess.
Well, I guess you have to be found by your potential users, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's always the biggest issue. And for xlwings specifically, that was kind of solved by somebody putting it on Hacker News, and from there on, it was kind of exploding.
Hmm.
And so whenever you create a software product, you need to find out like where your users are, and need to kind of share your homepage on these forums and on on these specific platforms where they actually can be seen. And I mean, there's things like I said, Hacker News for like more developer oriented tools, which for xlwings was a natural fit. But there is other platforms. There is Reddit, depending on the area you cover. So there's Excel Reddits in our case, not just Python, um, where you can promote your stuff. There's indie hackers, I believe, where a lot of people kind of have success, but it's always, I mean, that's always a bit developer oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So the other way obviously is to write content, and that's what actually probably takes a lot of time to create good content that Google is actually interested in and will make you appear in the search results.
Mm.
And that's a bit, probably that's where a lot of the work goes outside of programming, because it, yeah, you need to, apparently, I mean, in the old times you could just do some dirty SEO hacks, but meantime Google is apparently so smart that the only thing that kind of consistently works is just by putting up like high quality content posts where people really, I mean, solves an issue for people and they really come back to it, they stay on the page, they read it. So that's kind of what yeah, what causes actually a lot of work, because writing that content often, writing a good blog post often takes a lot of time, and that is a bit the issue. So you have to take that time away from development work. And if you are a software developer, then usually you're really good at developing software and you really like it, and you don't really like writing blog posts so much. And so that's always a bit the issue, and it's
Yeah.
obviously a bit the issue with me personally too.
Hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. It sounds like there's no shortcuts when it comes to getting your name out there. You've got to go find where your customers are hanging out, and then you've got to produce content that's gonna keep them hanging around. There's just no shortcuts. It's kind of what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I probably agree to that. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I have man, I let me so I'll just ask these last questions. Like you just whatever comes to mind, kind of like fire off here. But I was wondering what are like 3 favorite learning resources that you would recommend for like software development type stuff?
Well, probably the top of the list is Stack Overflow, right? I
Okay.
mean, whatever questions you put in, it appears in Stack Overflow, and it's definitely the only forum where you find the best answer at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't at the top, there's a command which says it shouldn't be the accepted answer. So definitely Stack Overflow. I personally do like reading books from time to time, programming books. But hardcore programmers, I find, tend to not do that. But for starting programmers, I guess that can be a good solution. And then what we discussed before, video courses. I mean, there's tons of video courses about each aspect of learning a language. Um, if you look for that niche product like Excel for Python, then there's a course, but every other niche too. So like if you want to learn data science for Python, I'm sure you will find your course. If you want to, Python for business users, you find your course. If you want to have advanced Python, you just mastered the basic, you want to go for advanced. there's a course for about anything, which I guess is a really good thing. So yeah, probably that. Obviously, the internet with Stack Overflow books and video courses. That would
Awesome.
be
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And what is like the best piece of advice you've ever received?
the best piece of advice I've ever received. I wouldn't know if it was a specific advice in that sense, but it kind of all boils down to kind of, GitHub stars don't buy you food, in the same sense that we've discussed previously. Open source is a complicated matter. If you want to do it seriously, you do have to think about how to finance it.
Yeah, the business model. That's man, I'd love to dig into that more. I know our time has kind of come to an end here, but I look forward to staying in touch with you. Maybe since you said you were a book person, I have to ask, what is like the most important book that you think you've ever read?
Programming book, you mean?
Any book that we are.
Any book.
No boundaries here. Yeah.
So I mean, I started off Python with with a book called well, I'm not even sure, like the basic programming book. I think it's called Programming Python in O'Reilly, like a big chunk book, like this big. That was my initial book. I read Wes McInnes, data. What's it called? Data. The data manipulator.
Is it data analysis in Python?
Data analysis, yeah.
Yeah.
Data analysis.
The Wes McKinney book.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I read that. That definitely that helped me. I read that on early on in my Python career. That I like that book definitely very much. Other than that, like outside of programming, I wouldn't be able to pull a title right away that really made a difference, I guess. I mean, I read various business books, but yeah, in terms of concrete title, let's stick with these two.
Okay, cool, man. Yeah, that sounds good. And what programming languages should be on people's radars going into 2020?
Whoa. Definitely Python, right?
Yeah. I kind of set up this whole interview for that answer, but yeah.
Definitely more Python and less VBA. Yeah. Other than that, I guess JavaScript is always good because like VBA or like let's say like Excel, it's not going to go anywhere, I guess, anytime soon. Mm-hmm. So that's always a good recommendation. Other than that, I wouldn't know from like personal experience. So yeah, I think there's always, hot new technologies coming out. And then there's some which kind of probably make a lot of sense in some certain kind of niches out there. So, but I wouldn't be in a position to really give some recommendations there. So, just stick with the good old ones that prove themselves and definitely will be around for some more years, like JavaScript and Python.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's awesome. So what is the call to action here? Where can people if they want to reach out to you, how do they contact you? I've got Twitter, LinkedIn links. I've got the xlwings.org, xltrail.com. You're on Stack Overflow. You've got a GitHub. Like what's your call to action and where do we send people?
Well, I guess the easiest is always go to xlwings.org. There is in the footer, there is, a team page. You find me there. My most preferred like social platform is definitely LinkedIn. So just type in my name there and you will definitely find me. So that these are the two easiest channels.
Okay, awesome. And then if they want to purchase like the pro version of your software, all those links are on xlwings.org. If they want the video course is actually on there as well. There's a
Yeah.
training tab on there. And those
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
from xlwings.org, you get to everything that we offer. There's a products page. You can also jump over to xltrail, the version control system. You can actually try it out online if you like to. And yeah, as you said, the training is it's all linked there. So if you go to xlwings.org, you will definitely find what you're looking for.
Awesome. Well, it's been an honor to have you on the show and chatting here, talking shop for an hour and a half. So, thank you for saying yes to this. That means you said no to so many other things. Uh, but yeah, did we leave anything off the table, or did we pretty much cover everything that needed
No, I
to be talked
guess,
about?
yeah. No, I enjoyed the interview. Thanks a lot
Cool.
for inviting me.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we'll talk to you soon. Peace.